Welcome back to the weekly grind. I am late on this one this week. I'm not even sorry. I've been trying to work my schedule as best I can to include at least an article a week, because that's the only thing I earn money for, as well as doing 2 YouTube videos and keeping up with everything else. And I've been staying up till like 5 every night. I'm pretty tired. And I don't mean to complain, I just want you to know I haven't been forgetting you. And I've also been basically absent from the Discord, and the same reason is my writing process is long and involved. I end up finding questions that I want answers to, and I go off on tangents. But I'm trying to get better at spitting out like actionable articles for Dynasty, since Dynasty League Football is where I write. And usually I do longer research pieces, but I really want to be able to improve my game, especially as this off season I've even been posting less best ball drafts. I've been posting pretty regular $3 12-man best ball drafts on Underdog, not because they sponsor me or anything, because no one does, but because I enjoy drafting, and I want to develop that part of fantasy because I don't do it much, and I really enjoy that aspect of it, especially some of the research that's involved in it from like TJ Hernandez and stuff. So I want to get more experience at it, and that has led me to trying to improve the more immediate aspect of the content I create. Like, go do this now. Now, as someone who tends to play as a value, I don't know what you would call it, but I like every player at the right price. It's a little harder for me to give generic, or not even generic, specific advice on this is something that's really actionable right now. Even my research pieces, because one of DLF's tenets of articles, it has to have valuable information in them people can act on. You have to explain how you can act on it in the article. Like, you can't just write about something that doesn't matter, because most people are reading, or if they are reading, looking at Dynasty information for what should I do, what should I know. And outside of rookie profiles, because that's really where the only place I evaluate potential talent based on what's happened in the past, I don't roll that way, bro. So I've been trying to get better, and with the help of Sam Wallace at RotoViz, I've been trying to force myself through this process of here's 3 players at this position you can go and get, or should go and get right now. I've just been developing like a trade center, but it's not really a trade center, it's just players I think that are really interesting for this season, that have upside based on their apparent dynasty value, based on trade calculators on DLF, but also based on their ADP, and also an Team Old Guy article, which I think is just going to be more of a Patreon one, and the trades one will go to DLF. Anyway, I've been kind of working on all this week, as part of this off-season push to get better at sophomores, to get better at immediate action, to get into best ball more often. And it's just kind of taken a toll. There was a guy walking around my house while I was at work, apparently. I've had to work 2 extra shifts, but I also got an extra day off at one of my jobs, but also they need me to work basically 3 or 4 shifts in a row, and that's why they gave me the day off. So it's been a mess. That's my weekly grind, but I still have been grinding because it doesn't stop. There is no off season, as DLF likes to say. So what have I learned? I can't even remember. This is going to be a shorter video. All of this has been going on, and it hasn't really coalesced into what I like for these videos. Is, again, shorter, sharper. Here's things that I found interesting through my work this week. So I'll try my best. Here's one. On the article I recently wrote for DLF, I did a Patreon version with a whole bunch of notes on other players I considered and some reasons why, but also there was a few player write-ups I didn't include, so I was trying to whittle it down to just a list of 3. And one of them was Chris Goblin. If you like the argument for Will Fuller in this season, in that he's been good, he's always been good, he's had health problems, Chris Goblin kind of has the same argument at a similar age, also on a good team, and a potentially good team with Will Fuller. I really think there's upside in the way the market's viewing Miami right now, but I kind of felt that a few different times, to be honest with you. Miami is one of those ones that you keep hoping that maybe with a fully healthy Tua and so on and so forth. But Tampa Bay we got, right? We know it's good. They just won the Super Bowl. It's got Tom Brady. It's got an epic number of receivers, old and new. Speaking of which, one of the most interesting articles I've ever read, actually ended up rereading this week, was from Adam Harnstead, who everyone knows, obviously. But it was about, and I think it integrated its way into my thinking, but I never really remembered the article. But I was talking to him on Twitter the other day, It's pretty fun for me. And he reposted it, and so that I could read it. And it was about how we view injuries and older players incorrectly. And this is how I think about it. And I don't know how much of I owe to this article, and how much this article is just reflecting what I myself have learned, which is essentially you should stop thinking about an age curve, which is definitely part of my thinking that it doesn't work. You don't get gradually worse as you get older. You either perform or you don't. And that's essentially what Adam Harstad's article and research was showing. And he had this whole interesting metaphor, several of them actually, in order to describe it. But the ultimate conclusion was that mortality rates instead of age curves are the best way to see it. Essentially, a coin is flipped at the start of the season, and that player is either going to play and be good because they're a good player, or they are not, and so it's going to be bad for fantasy. Now, the chances that coin, imagine multiple sides of the coin, is going to come up, not play, or get injured, or maybe just age out like Peyton Manning did that once, increase as they get older, but it's still a coin flip. They could still be great in X amount number of times out of 10 if that season is replayed. You get an increasing likelihood they're going to fall, but they're not decreasing. The age curve does not diminish, and so if they play, they're interesting, which also makes Antonio Brown still part of that team old guy potential for 2021, and that's one of the guys we're going to put in that Patreon article. I mean, he's never not been good when he's on the field, so he's kind of proof of it as well. And what you might think of him and what you want as part of your firm for fantasy, I'm all good with it. But if he plays, you should probably expect him to be pretty good, really decent value, especially in Dynasty right now. So yeah, he's one on the list. But where was I? Chris Goblin. And that's what led me to Chris Goblin as well, because I was looking at the Tampa Bay situation. Chris Goblin is not as old as Antonio Brown, and he was the points per game leader on that team for the entire position outside of Tom Brady, because he's a quarterback. They get obviously an exaggerated number of points on a weekly basis compared to the other positions. He got like 15.9 points per game. That ranks him as I think it was a wide receiver 12 over the last 3 years. He did really well last year, and it feels like he's not a name that gets spoken about a lot. When you go and look at his value, he's pretty well valued. I don't think you're getting him cheap in trades, but it's not someone anyone's holding on to for dear life. He came back after missing a few games at the start of the season, and the only game he was out targeted by is Antonio Brown. The only guy who outperformed him on a per snap or per team attempt basis was Antonio Brown. And Mike Evans is an entirely different conversation and is slipping in ADP and could be a value next year as well. But it just feels like Chris Godwin as more of the volume guy, second maybe just to Antonio Brown, with less risk and almost no interest in the dynasty. At least in my bubble, almost no one's talking about Chris Godwin. Just feels like there's a potential there, and so he was the guy I wrote up as an extra for that Patreon version of the wide receivers to buy right now in Dynasty, because he's not that old, and his value should hold for at least the next couple of years, and he did nothing in 2020 that was any different to his big season where he finished as a top 5 wide receiver. He was still exceptionally good, outperforming his expected points by about 3 points per game instead of 5 points per game, which is when he ended up as a top 5. But that still shows continued efficiency with excessive volume. Now, efficiency isn't sticky, but volume is. And again, Chris Godwin had the volume last year as well. So I guess that lack of conversation might just be because he is where he is, but I thought it was interesting because I basically put a pin in him the moment they drafted Tyler Johnson and picked up Antonio Brown, and Mike Evans is already on the team. I basically been like, well, he's over 25 now as well. Put a pin in him at some point, and I think it might be time to pull that pin out. Anyway, it was an interesting process to go through. What else was I looking at? The Darrnel Mooney conversation is alive on Twitter. I really thought Michael Thomas was going to re-kick the vacated targets argument back into full gear, and I was going to have fun with that, but it seems to have been somewhat muted because we don't know how much time he's going to miss, so on and so forth. But Darrnel Mooney definitely spawned it. Mostly people saying Anthony Miller wasn't a threat already, which is very true, but I do like the show of confidence in Darrnel Mooney, and so I was reinvestigating, or actually looking for the first time. I just had my opinion on Darrnel Mooney, and I hadn't really compared him to past players that were drafted in the 4th round or later to the past, And I don't know, there's lots of ways you can look at it, but one way that I pulled up fairly quickly was to look at my sophomore model, which I run every year for every player. So actually I can look at a history of the sophomore model, which is kind of an interesting look, I think, especially for wide receivers with later draft capital. Comparing him to wide receivers drafted in the 4th round or later that went on to have a top 24 season, he ranks about 3rd on the list. Now that's not everything, because like everything, the best wide receivers didn't roll to the top, but Stephon Diggs did, and Darrnel Mooney basically did not as good, but discount version of what Stephon Diggs did in his first year, which made him stand out so well. And finally, the people that were fading him based on the NFL draft hopefully knew by then that he was good. Darnell Mooney wasn't quite that good, but it wasn't too far off, and it was pretty similar to Robbie Anderson. I think he did really well last year. He projected an opportunity and be a good player in the NFL, but the chances of Chicago producing 2 top 24 wide receivers or some version of that was probably what was keeping him outside of our buy or a deep interest list or my deep interest list. But the truth is that everyone who scored over 11 points per game in my sophomore model, judging what their points per game would be the following season based on 3 or 4 variables that had stickiness. It's a fairly hashed together model, but again, I'm trying to get better at evaluating how players do in the NFL, since it is the most important data point. So I thought maybe try and create a model about it like I do with rookies. Everyone who scored over 11 went on to have at least one top 24 season. That does include Alan Hearns, by the way, but again, he broke out for that top 24 season his second year, and Darnell Mooney's on that list. So Justin Fields is new. I can't read the team situation or how good Justin Fields is for you. I do think he's the QB2 in this class, just playing the market, as it were. And Darnell Mooney did really well last year. The team seemed very comfortable with that fact. He's got Allen Robinson help him out, because good players do help you, and perhaps an improved team situation. Despite the fact everyone just wants to hate David Montgomery, he's clearly capable. And if Fields or whoever actually keeps that job this season can sustain average QB play, there is a potential for a top 24 season for Darnell Mooney, and so I moved him up in projections as well as a few other players. I was also tweaking New England backfield while pulling back their overall attempts, because I'm starting to get less and less invested in New England outside of Jacoby Myers. And also, some of my patrons were asking about, who is it, Damian Harris? They thought he should be actually on the top list of 75 projected running backs, and so I moved him up a little bit to get him there. I raked back, whichever one works well. New Orleans overall attempts as well. Again, I don't change the team projections that we created for the model. What I do is change player projections, and I did it to the point where their per game rushing and passing attempts were significantly below last year's, or at least especially their passing, because I just don't see the output being anywhere close to similar, coming off a heightened 2020 season anyway, even though they didn't benefit too much from it, and with the loss of Michael Thomas. Now basically it's Alvin Kamara and everyone else scraping out for streamability for fantasy, which again typically leads you to tight ends anyway, and they have some interesting streamable, at least, tight ends. Hunter Henry's currently hitting the borderline top 12 for me right now in projections. What else did I learn? I think Kenny Galladay has top 12 upside at the wide receiver position. I've been thinking that for a while, and just because he's done it before, he's good. He just got invested in by a team. The team should see some improvement, at least in touchdowns this year, but it's remarkably hard to make the case for Kenny Galladay and Evan Ingram, which is basically where all my investment in the New York Giants is going, just because he's so dirt cheap this year. He's like the Juju Smith-Schuster of Evan Ingram. I get that we now have muted expectations and they've disappointed us in the past, but they're going so low. They're just guaranteed buys in Dynasty and drafts. Even in Best Ball, they're going so low. It looks kind of ridiculous to me. But I want to make a case for Kenny Galladay being team old guy potential upside, doing his best poor man's version of DeAndre Hopkins this year, having moved to another team and still being a wide receiver 1 for a team with a slightly less complicated depth chart. But it is a worse team. I don't think he's DeAndre Hopkins. He's nowhere close to DeAndre Hopkins either. So where I'm investing in Evan Ingram, I don't quite know where to feel about my level of interest in investing in Kenny Galladay. Does he make the team old guy list or not? And no, stay tuned. What else was I watching? Oh, Steve Smith. Apparently, even in my new updated system of working out player IDs in my NFL database, which I recently, the basic database, I forgot to stop making it Patreon only. The whole reason I made it was so everyone had access to some level of NFL stats, as well as my whole college database, and I also put a mini college database in there just so they didn't have to flip between the two, and they could see both at the time. But I made that public. I've reshared it. There's a link to it in my pinned tweet. It links straight to the Patreon post, which links straight for free to my college database. So all my data on all prospects coming into the NFL since 2000 at all positions is right there. And in the other databases tab, there is now a link directly to the basic database, which has basic NFL stats going all the way back to the same time frame for 2000. So that's the thing I added. But in looking at breakout rates and stuff, I realized the numbers were in the one that's on Google Sheets and my version, and then the live version, which is where it all populates from, we're all spreading out slightly different numbers. This has happened before because you have to run multiple array formulas, and I have several helper columns. Don't know why I'm showing you directions. It's not like you can see the damn thing. And it's a little bit of a finicky process to create breakout year, essentially. It just is. If you ever play in Excel, you'll see why. But it's a weird thing to calculate. But yeah, I was running through it, and one of the reasons was that Steve Smith, a few of the Steve Smiths, you know, the 2001 version, the guy who owns Denny Carter version, some of his seasons were getting ascribed to the other Steve Smith that was drafted in 2007, and so I had to rejiggle some of the player IDs manually to get everything calculating accurately again. There are a few other little hiccups in that data as well, so in the next NFL database update, I'll fix all of that as well. It wasn't throwing off the trend. It's not like it was drastically affecting the numbers, otherwise I'd be looking a lot more panicked right now. It's just a few little missteps here and there, and enough to drive a nerd crazy. That's all it was. But yeah, I found that Steve Smith is still causing me problems, even though not him, his ID, but still. And I found that and fixed that again this week as well. What else? I think that's about it. That can cover today. I am, if nothing, I am as linear as I am scheduled. In that I get that just in case you're paying attention, my podcast is often late. So you meant to drop Saturdays, which was yesterday for me. I don't know what day this is for you. My weekly video, which is this, is meant to drop earlier in the week, and now obviously it's the weekend, so I definitely failed on that. But essentially what I'm saying is I'm always kind of behind, or I will fairly often get behind on schedule, but they always do get produced linearly. So I'm making this now so that I can make the podcast one online, the YouTube, and also the podcast actual version tomorrow, and do it all in order. Because if I get out of order, that's when I start forgetting stuff. Now, being late's one thing, but if I don't do things in an order, in a linear fashion, I don't know why I'm using the word linear, that's when I start to feel kind of crazy. So sorry this one's late. You probably don't watch these. I don't know who I'm talking to. Oh, you definitely don't watch them in order, but I really do appreciate any amount that you are watching it. Let me know what else you'd like me to include in the weekly grind. Like, should I do an update of projections more specifically? Like, should that be a segment or not? Because I'm kind of treating this video every week is kind of like a second podcast, but a YouTube only podcast, and much more freeform even than my other stuff, because I'm literally just talking about things that I learned or experienced or whatever in my fantasy life this week. So let me know in the comments below. Really appreciate it, guys, honestly. Thanks very much, and if you're gonna watch the next one, because you're probably watching this 2 weeks late, I have no idea, then I will see you there. I really appreciate it. See you in a second, hopefully, and let me know what else you'd like to hear in a regular podcast, just talking about the grind of working projections or working fantasy research to write articles, what you're interested in, and I'll start including it and making these not less freeform, but a little more organized. Anyway, appreciate it. Talk to you again in the next one. See you there. Thanks very much.